There we go. So hello, everybody. My name is Scott Forehand. This is our twice monthly Thursday night presentation. This is on debt-free life, and which is Symmetry's proprietary infinite bank product. It is proprietary because there's a lot of technology that goes in behind planning these programs, a lot of math that has to get done. And if hopefully you're working with the Symmetry agent because they have access to that software. If you're not working with the Symmetry agent, good luck. All right, so let's move on. So this is the debt-free life program. This is actually a play on words. The words debt. This is an infinite bank. Okay, if you have debt before the infinite bank can really get to be a bank, you got to eliminate your debt. So this process starts with eliminating of your debt first, and then going into the infinite bank side of the equation, which will show the difference here in a few minutes. So we start this program by asking simply two questions. And the first question is, if we could show you how to get out of debt in 9 years or less, including your mortgage, without you paying any more money than you're paying right now, would you be interested in listening to us? And of course, the answer to that question is yes. And the other part of this, and this is where everybody should be answering this question, are you 100% sure you're going to have a great retirement, or do you have some doubt? That even if you ask a 20-year veteran financial advisor, there's going to be some doubt. There's always going to be some doubt, especially if the programs that you're in are subject to the market oscillation. Anyway, exposed to the stock market. Anybody follow the market today? Was it down 600 points in the morning and up 800 points in the afternoon? It's crazy, right? I do not want to be on that railroad. So these are the two questions that we ask, and of course, that's probably why you're here. So this is what we look at from a perspective of the average American household. About 74 cents of every dollar is being used to pay either taxes or interest. And this is absolutely not what our founding fathers had planned for us. This is not what it's supposed to be. And unfortunately, with all the politicians, not one side or the other, with all the politicians, it's not going to get any better. They are all engaged in trying to keep their jobs and spend more money for their local constituents, which means the rest of us have to end up paying. And it's unfortunate. If you look at the rest of the pie, 3% is about what you save. That's unfortunately it's going to be short, and you'll find out in just a second why. And then 23% is what you live on. That's to pay your Hulu bill, your Netflix bill, your power bill, put gas in your car, put food on the table. Anybody watch the numbers that just came out today? Food prices are up 11%. Fuel oil prices are up 19%. Gasoline's almost doubled since the current administration's taken control. It's not good. We're not in a good spot. And if you're following the market and at least seeing what the market does, and you follow what a lot of leading economists say, it's going to be a long time for us to come back to where we were at the beginning of this year. So if you have the option to leave your money in a retirement program that is subject to the market, and you're going to ride it down, hopefully eventually to come back up, or you could stop the hemorrhaging right now. Instead of writing it down, actually write it up as it's going down and then keep going. Which one would you want to do? And I'm saying that it's kind of a joke, but it's true. Ted Brenna, the guy that invented the 401k, went on the record 6 months ago, and he said that the 401ks and retirement programs like it are not what he intended when he invented them back in the 60s and 70s. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're not being used the way they're supposed to be used. And there's too much governmental regulation and ability to tax them. He does not recommend those programs for retirement programs. He specifically named the one program that he would like to use or would recommend using in their place, an infinite bank. And that's what this is. This is an infinite bank. And we'll show you why he said that in just a minute. First, let's take a look about how we save money and what we are planning for with retirement. The average American makes $2 million over their lifetime. That's a good amount of money, especially if you spend it correctly. Unfortunately, none of us spend it correctly, or at least we're not taught how to. The average American saves 3% of their income, right? That's great. Except for at the end of the line, 3% amounts to about $60,000. That's actually what the average American at retirement has, is actually less than that. It's scary. So if you make $2 million in your lifetime and you've saved $60,000, that means you are going to be reliant upon the federal government to pay your way after you retire. And the big problem with that is they just came up with an 8.7% announced yesterday, 8.7% increase in Social Security. That's great, except for the cost of living actually increased 9%. So what are those people going to do, right? You're getting a lot more money, but not really. It's actually costing you a lot more to live. So this is unfortunate. It's an unfortunate time. It'll right itself over time. Eventually enough people will get angry and they'll, in theory, fire a lot of the people that are in office these days. We'll see. But I'm not banking on it. I'd rather not wait on that to happen. I'd rather go ahead and do something now that I have control over, which is what an infinite bank is. So let's move on. So in the infinite bank process, we are told a couple of things. And if we have, let's start with the debt piece. So if you have debt, then you are told, if you go talk to a credit counselor or a debt counselor or one of those folks that's in theory going to quote unquote help you, they're going to tell you to go work harder, get a second job, spend less money, go eat tuna fish and ramen, refinance your debt, consolidate your debt. And maybe if they're really on the high end of the spectrum, they might tell you to do a debt snowball. Right? Those first 5 items fail. Why? Well, how long can you work harder? If you could have worked harder previously, wouldn't you have already done that? Does it become easier to work harder as you get older? And of course, none of these are going to be answered the way that you want them to be answered. The reality is different. How do you spend less money? Well, and how long can you do that for? There's only so many different places you can scrimp. You can cut off your cell phone. You can cut off your cable bill. You can cut off your, conserve power, only wash and dry clothes late at night at midnight. There's things you can do, but there's only so much you can do. Saving more money. If you're not making any more money and you're spending everything to live on, how are you going to save more money, right? Next, refinance. Okay, so that means we're going to take this debt and refinance it so that now it's just simply moved over here. Does that make any sense? You still have the debt. You haven't done anything. And I would bet and I would venture that with those folks that would be offering the refinancing, they're not doing it for free. There's probably a fee associated with that. Consolidation. That's taking a bunch of little debts and putting them into one giant debt, which is much harder to pay off than a bunch of little debts. That's absolutely the wrong thing to do. And then finally, a debt snowball. Not the debt snowball that Dave Ramsey teaches, because that's wrong. I'm talking about a true debt snowball, not a debt stack, which is what Ramsey teaches. So let's move on. So if we could eliminate your debt in 9 years, wouldn't you want to? Of course you would. How do you do it? Well, first off, we have to change the way you spend money. We have to change the way you think about money. We have to change the way you store and save money. We want to get you from the left side of your screen to the right side of your screen. We want to get you from the point where you're only saving 3% of your income to where you're saving 500% more than that, which is 15%. So if you had $60,000, let's put this in perspective. If you retire and you have $60,000 and you're used to making $100,000 a year, how long is that 60 going to last? Not long, unless you're taking just a little tiny bit of money. What happens if you had 5 times that, $300,000? Then you're it's still not going to last forever, but it's going to be a heck of a lot easier. So that's what our goal is here. Our goal is to reduce the places where you're spending money inefficiently, which is taxes and interest, and increase the places where you're storing money efficiently, which is savings. And then finally, the end result of this is your cash flow is going to increase. What does that mean? That means your cash flow is going to increase by about 35 to 40%. So if you have right now $1,000 a month left over at the end of every month, if you're spending everything but $1,000, if you increase your cash flow by 35 to 40%, that means at minimum, you're going to have $300 to $400 more per month, $1,400. And that's a lot of money. That's a significant amount of money if your budget is that tight. And that's what we're going to do. One caveat, everything we say here, all the projections we show, these are based on worst case scenarios. So the nice thing about the software that we use and when we present these programs is whatever we show you, it's actually going to be better than that. The performance is going to be better. We'd much rather under promise and over deliver. I don't want to get that call at 10 o'clock at night forehand. I'm $10,000 short of where you said I would be. I don't want to get that call, and I've never gotten that call, right? Because everything that we do and everything we plan is actually less than where it's actually going to be. So let's move on. So our situation is different. And what we try to do is what we already said: reduce the amount of interest that you're paying to your creditors, reduce the amount of taxes you pay over time, increase your cash flow. All these things will consolidate to a better life for you, a better financial future for you, a better retirement for you. There are lots of programs that are out there. Let's list them. You've got programs that are based on whole life. Why do those fail? Well, because a whole life policy by default is a variable rate program. It's a variable rate loan. If it's a variable rate and I ask you, what's the rate going to be in 2 years? You don't have a clue. You have no idea. What I can tell you is those variable rates are linked to the market and linked to the interest rate that's set by the Fed. So what does that mean? I'll bet you money. I'll bet you all the money I got that your interest rate on your home equity line of credit is going up. Whenever the next time it adjusts, it's going up, which means it's going to become harder and harder and harder to use that program to eliminate your debt because you're incurring more debt as you move forward in time. So home equity line of credit's bad idea. I'm not going to advertise for the two primary companies out there that use them, but I will say it's also called the Australian model and the Australian method. And those are great when the market is low and flat. They are horrible when the market interest rate is high. The next, there's a sweeps campaign out there. This involves you spending a lot of money for a very expensive piece of software. Over time, that expensive piece of software will pay for itself. Over time, that expensive piece of software will eventually make you some money. The problem is the time it takes you to pay that software off and then make a profit. If you were in something that made a profit from day one, you'll be light years ahead of it in the end. If you've got enough money to make that sweeps campaign work for you, then you should definitely be in one of these programs we're going to talk about tonight. Finally, the last piece, what we do here, what we're building these infinite banks on, we're using, this is called the Rockefeller method. We're using John Rockefeller's original concept back in 1904, which is a whole life policy. Unfortunately for Rockefeller, the whole life policies that he had access to are different than the ones we have today. So the Rockefeller method has a much lower and slower growth. So we don't want to use that. We want to use the concept. The next one that's out there that's pretty popular is one that's based on an indexed universal life. Why is that a bad idea? Because that word indexed, what does that mean? That means that the growth of your program is linked to the performance of the stock market via an index. So if you're in a program where the growth is determined by the growth of the stock market, that means this year you've got a zero so far. You haven't lost any money. The market's lost 20%. You haven't lost any because you're indexed to the market, but you haven't had any gain. So again, this goes back to that conversation. I can have no gain for a couple of years, or I can be in something that's going to have a guaranteed gain for that same couple of years. So by the time the one that has no gain, the IUL, is starting to turn the corner and make a gain, I'm already ahead, and the IUL can't catch up. So that leaves us with the last one, which is participating whole life. We'll get deeper into that. But one of the key differences why a lot of those programs that are out there fail is because they haven't planned for an emergency. What's the emergency? I don't know. It's an emergency. We can't plan for an emergency. But I know that if you don't have funds available for it, then that emergency becomes even worse. It gets exacerbated. So what do we do here? Our 20%, that's the hidden amount of money that's in your program. That's the amount of money that it's there. If you need it, you can access it, but it's for an emergency. And when I say emergency, I mean it's painful to touch that money, because if you do, you're closing your program out. You're surrendering your program. Bad idea, right? It's the whole reason why we do these programs, is to have that massive growth, permanent wealth, the whole 9 yards. So if you have a real emergency, I don't mean I need a new car, maybe. I mean something like my brother-in-law just got diagnosed with cancer. He doesn't have any income. He's a sole breadwinner for his family. They're not going to have any income while he goes through chemo and radiation. They're going to lose their house. They're going to lose their farm. They're going to lose their car. I'm going to sacrifice my policy and give my brother-in-law money. That's the kind of emergency I'm talking about. All right. So let's move on. When you compare these programs that I just did a second ago, when you compare these programs to other vehicles that are out there, vehicle meaning an investment vehicle, you've got the first one, which is a tax-free growth vehicle. You've got the middle one, which is a tax-deferred growth vehicle, which is like an IRA. And you've got the final one, which is a taxed growth vehicle. That would be using something that you're going to pay income tax on it. It's going to invest, and you're also going to pay tax on it when you pull it out, double tax, or even just a savings account. That would be a good representation of that. You're paying the tax on it. It's going to have very minimal growth. You're relatively liquid, but you're not going to grow wealth. You're going to grow wealth. You're going to lose money technically, because as the value of money declines over time, and you're not getting the increase to replace your loss in the value of the dollar, then you're actually losing money. In all three of these scenarios, we use the same parameters of investment. We use a $10,000 investment. We use a 28-year investment time period. We use a 7% average return. Anybody out there getting an average of 7% return in their IRA? No. I already know the answer to that. No. And then finally, a 25% tax rate. Is anybody out there only in the 25% tax bracket? If so, great. Unfortunately, that's not going to exist for much longer. The federal government is going to have to change the tax rules. They are going to have to increase the tax rate for everybody, because they've got so much debt out there that they're going to have to do something to replace it. Rather than the $98,000 of debt per live human being in this country that we currently have, right? So they're going to have to do something to eliminate that at some point. When? I don't know. But the point is you can grow money in a tax-free environment, a tax-deferred environment, or a taxed environment. All three of those cases, the rate of growth, if it's at 7%, in all three of those cases, the tax-free is always going to outperform the other two. Is it really tax-free? No. You are going to pay the tax initially on any money you put in there. Okay, so you're always going to pay tax on the initial amount you put in there, but the growth is going to be tax-free, and how you receive the money is going to make it tax-free. We'll talk about that in a minute. This is a financial instrument. Like all financial instruments, it works in phases. If you're in your 401k right now and you're still contributing to your 401k and you're still working, then you're in the accumulation phase of your 401k. If you are retired and you are taking money out of your 401k to live on, then you are in the distribution phase of your 401k. If you are brand new to work and you just started your 401k and you're starting to add a little bit, and then next year when you get a raise, you'll add a little bit more, you're in the maximization phase of your 401k. All three of those things can be said exactly the same way for what we do here at this Infinite Bank. If you're brand new, you just start your Infinite Bank, you're in the maximization phase. Maximization is where we're going to get to that point where we're having the most amount of money going to it at a level period for a long period of time, at a level amount for a long period of time. The only way we get there is to eliminate debt. That's the key thing. That's why this works in phases. First phase is maximization, also called the debt elimination phase. Okay, accumulation. Once you reach the accumulation phase, that's the highest and best amount of money you're going to be putting in, and you're putting it in for a period of time. How long? I don't know. It's up to you. Okay, and then finally distribution. That's when you're taking that emergency trip to Tahiti. You're buying that emergency jet ski and you're spending the money. And hopefully you're like some of the people I know, you're spending it because you're not planning on leaving anything for the kids. You're going to spend it all while you're here. Great. Okay. In this model, you can do that. You can spend all your money and not necessarily leave any of that money for the kids, because this is still life insurance, which means you're going to be leaving a legacy anyway. We talked earlier about this is the Rockefeller model. This is not new, right? There's some of the people on your screen. I don't need to go over them, but these are all people that have done this. Some of the other families that have done this back in history. J.C. Penney used to do this in a business version of this, because he used to store money, because the J.C. Penney business model was cyclical and was seasonal. So there were times when the cash flow wasn't enough for him to make payroll. So he would store money in here, just the same way construction companies do these days. They have a line of credit that's open. They put money in their line of credit when the business is good and pay off their line of credit, and they draw from it when business is slow to help keep their employees employed and pay them. Same thing, except in this case, the rate of cost, the cost of money with these programs is 0.8% or less. Whereas your home equity line of credit or your just general or personal line of credit is going to be somewhere in the 5 to 8% range, depending on how good your credit is and how good of a relationship you have with your personal banker at your local bank. Let's move on. All right. So we're using life insurance for a number of reasons. We want to capture money. We want to have the money grow for us. We want to be able to access the money in a tax-exempt manner. We want to use it to pay off our debts quickly. We want to finance our future purchases. So one of the things that I like to teach people about is this. Debt isn't linear. It's circular. So if you think of debt, I owe debt, I pay debt, I got extra money. I owe debt, I pay debt, I've got extra money, right? So if it's a circle or a cycle, then let's say you have a car where let's say you got a nice blue 2022 Maserati, and that 2022 Maserati needs a new set of tires because you drive that Maserati like a bat out of hell. And that Maserati goes through tires like a hot knife through butter. And those tires are $1,600 a piece. Okay. So that means about every 10,000 miles, you're spending $7,000 on new tires. So if we know that this is it's a debt and it's a cycle, then while we're in this phase where we're growing our cash flow, we can actually be prepared to start paying that debt as it comes due. So we can pre-fund those debts. So if I know that I'm going to spend $1,600 on 4 tires, and I know that I'm going to do that a year and a half from now, 16 months from now, then why don't I pay for one of those tires every 4 months? So that's $200 a month. So if I just put $200 a month in then by the time I get to the point where I need that money for the tires, I've prepaid my debt. I can take the loan for myself and go do it. I've already paid the loan back to myself because I paid it in advance. So this is a concept about cycling through debt. Okay, I just put that in the back of your head. Let's move on. Okay, reducing debt. So this is what our goal is. This is the benefit of an infinite bank when it's in a debt-free life situation, when we're using it to enable a debt-free life. This is all we're doing. We're reducing our taxes, reducing our interest rate, eliminating destroying actually amortization schedules, and then using that money that we would have been spending for that interest, serving that debt, the debt service. We're using that interest money that we would have been spending otherwise. We're using it to repay our debt and eventually grow our cash. So let's talk about that for a second. Okay. Before you can do this, you have to understand how you spend money. Right now, you make money. So you make money and you get that money deposited into your checking account. And as it goes into your checking account, your bank uses it. They lend your money out 7 times on average before you get to use it. The average bank makes 61 cents with every dollar you put into it before you actually get to use your money. And while that money is sitting in there and the bank's making money with it over and over and over again, eventually you say, hey, bank, I want you to pay my debt. Bank says, okay, I'll pay your debt. And in that scenario, your money just became their money. So Katie did this, and Katie sent her money to her bank. Her bank used it over and over and over again, made lots of money with her money, didn't pay Katie anything. Katie said, pay off my Dolly Parkin RV. And then eventually Katie's money became the Dolly Parkin RV's note owner's money. And the bank is the only one or the only entity in that transaction that actually made any money. Katie spent the money. The bank made the money. The bank sent the money to the creditor. And that's the end. So Katie traded X amount of dollars for X amount of reduced debt. And in that scenario, Katie's gain is 0. She traded X for X, right? In a debt-free life bank, I'm going to show you how you can gain 100%. So here's the next step. This is how we do it. This is the better way to do it. This is, in my opinion, a more efficient way to spend money. And here it is. So you make the money same way as you made money before. It doesn't matter whether you're a 1099, a W-2, W-4, if you're on disability and receiving money from the federal government, if you're a trust fund baby like Tom Deutsch is, right? Doesn't matter. I love you, Tom. So you make the money, it gets deposited just the way it did before into your checking account. And now here's where the rubber meets the road. Instead of us allowing the money to sit in our checking account and allowing the bank to use our money over and over and over again, make 61 cents with every dollar we put in and not give us any of it, we're going to say, wait a minute, I have to pay my life insurance policy. Voila. So when you make that payment for that life insurance policy, which is a participating whole life, we'll talk about that in a second, then what you're doing is you're moving money from your checking account into what is going to be your private bank or your infinite bank. When the money hits the bank account, or excuse me, hits your private bank, which is your life insurance company, that money is paying for a whole life policy with two riders, two separate, very important and distinct riders. One of the reasons why we do this, and if you remember that slide a couple slides ago where we talked about how the tax-free strategy is better than the tax-deferred or the taxed strategy. This is because we're taking advantage of IRS tax code 7702A. And what that says is, as long as the however you derive money from a life insurance policy, it is not taxed. It's not a taxable event. Whether you die and the beneficiaries receive the income or receive the death benefit, not taxable. If you take a loan from the policy, loans are never taxable. When you bought your house, you did not have to pay income tax on the amount of the loan that you received to buy your house. When you bought your car, you did not have to receive, you didn't pay taxes on what you received. When you did your student loans, you didn't have to pay tax on the student loans, right? So loans are not taxable. And then finally, if the method of growth here ends up being an interest rate that's paid in the form of life insurance or a dividend that's paid in the form of life insurance, it's not a taxable event. So however you derive funds from this program, with the exception of canceling it, surrendering it, and taking the cash as a surrender, it's not a taxable event. And in that last instance, if you surrender the policy and your cost basis over the years, let's say, is $20,000, and you receive $19,999, it is not a taxable event. If you receive $20,001, it is a taxable event, and you owe tax on $1. $1. All right. So it's only the amount that you gained beyond your basis if you surrender the policy and owe tax. So finally, if you remember that last slide, the bank was making money every night with our money. They lend it out every night at the federal funds rate or higher. They make anywhere between 1.8 and 24% with your dollar every night. They don't give you any of it. And they don't do anything for you other than say, thank you very much for keeping your money in our bank. And because you're putting so much money in our bank, we're not going to charge you a fee to keep your money in our bank and let us use your money for free. Okay. Incidentally, that's called arbitrage, when you can borrow money at a lesser interest rate than you can lend it out at. And that's the primary method that banks make their money. This is called a debt-free life bank for a reason. Now we've changed the game. And now we've got our money in our debt-free life bank. So as I make that premium payment for my whole life policy, it gets split into three parts: whole life core policy, term life rider, paid up additions rider. The paid up additions, that's the magic here. Okay. In the whole life rider, about half of what the core cost of the whole life policy is being stored as true cash value. The term life rider costs about half of what the whole life rider, the whole life core policy costs. And then the paid up addition roughly represents somewhere between 60 and 70% of every premium payment you make. So let's use real numbers. So let's say my premium payment is $1,000 a month. Okay. And I pay $1,000. Then when it hits the carrier splits it up into three parts. 21% goes to whole life. It means I paid $210 for my whole life policy. 11% goes to my term life. That means I paid 11% for my whole life, or for my term life. And the balance, which is roughly 67%, goes to paid up additions, which the carrier recognizes as cash value. It is not cash value. It is actually paid up additional life insurance, but the carrier recognizes it as cash value, which means when they give you the guaranteed interest coming in over top and the dividend coming in from the side, those two numbers are based on the value of your paid up addition side. In addition, remember that emergency fund? That's hidden in the whole life core policy. 21% is going to whole life. About half of that is being recognized as cash value. Okay. Now, is this a valuable thing? Absolutely it is. And if you want proof of that, you don't have to look any further than your local bank. So let's say you bank with Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has to keep a certain amount of assets available to them so that they can use that as a, yeah, I've got assets in case everything happens and things go south. I've got enough assets that I can fund my liabilities. They consider life insurance, especially paid up life insurance, as what they call a tier 1 asset. 4 tiers of assets in the banking world. Tier 4, 3, 2, and 1. Tier 4, very risky. Tier 1, very safe. What's a very risky tier 4 investment? Lending $1 million to a 19-year-old busboy to go open a restaurant. That's a really, really risky investment, right? What are the chances you're ever going to see that money again? I would say 0. All right. What's a good investment? Gold. Good investment, right? Permanent value. What are the problems with gold? I don't know what the value is going to be. Can it be stolen? Absolutely. It gets stolen all the time. So in the grand scheme of things, what's a really good investment? One that doesn't ever lose value, one that doesn't cost me any to protect it, and one that I don't have to spend any money to maintain. That, folks, is a paid up addition life insurance policy. There are companies out there called viatical settlement companies. That's all they do, is they go around and find people with life insurance and they say, hey, if you've got a life insurance policy worth $100,000 or more, don't cancel it. Call us first. It might be worth some money and we'll give you some money for it. What are they doing? They're going around and finding life insurance policies that have cash value. They're giving you 10 cents on the dollar, taking the rest, making themselves the beneficiary, and then selling that to a bank and making the bank the beneficiary, and that becomes an asset for the bank. So that's that asset class, a tier 1 asset, right? So if the banks think it's a tier 1 asset, and I'm going to tell you this, I've seen 2 numbers. I've seen $28.6 billion of paid up life insurance on the asset rolls of Wells Fargo, and I've seen $48 billion on the asset rolls of Wells Fargo. I don't know which one is correct, but they're both pretty substantial. So if the banks see it, the banks know it, and the banks are the ones who teach us how to get into debt and how to, in theory, how to save money and make the banks more money, then I think they've got it figured out. I'm not saying they figured it out on the right side. It's just they figured it out for themselves. So why not follow them, right? So now let's fast forward. So now Katie gets to the point where it's time to pay off her car. She owes $1,000 on her car, and she's got $2,000 in paid up additions life insurance in her program. What does she do? She does not stroke a check for the car. She calls up her carrier and says, hey, send me $1,000. And the only person who gets to make a decision as to whether or not Katie gets sent that $1,000 is Katie, right? Because she's the banker, she's the owner, she's the payor, she's the beneficiary, and she's probably the insured. Katie makes the decision. And Katie says, yeah, I'm going to lend myself the money. Okay. So then Katie makes a decision. Am I going to charge myself interest? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Am I going to take myself to court if I don't repay my loan? Probably not, right? So Katie has all these options, all these choices. So what Katie does, she goes to her bank, her private bank, which is her life insurance company, says, hey, send me $1,000. Life insurance company says, okay, great. We'll have it there tomorrow, next day, or the next day, depending on how quickly your bank recognizes the wire. So Katie says, send me $1,000. The carrier says, okay, here's your $1,000. Carrier loan gets deposited directly back into Katie's checking account. And then Katie says, hey, Mr. Bank, before you can use that money 7 times and not pay me anything, I want you to send it to my creditor and pay that debt off. And the creditor receives the money. Does the creditor care where the money came from? They do not. All they want to do is get paid. So here's your example. I told you earlier, when you traded X for X, your cash for your debt, you had 0 gain. Where's your money? Your money is still in your private DFL bank. You did not use your money. This is Robert Kiyosaki. It's always best to pay off a debt with somebody else's money. This is what you're doing, guys. You are using the carrier's money, a loan that's been collateralized by your cash in your private bank, and you're taking that money, depositing into your checking account, and then paying your debt. Your debt is paid. So on this side of the equation, you've got plus X, your debt is paid. You got your plus X on this side of the equation. You've got cash. You still got your $1,000 cash. What's your gain? So in the first equation, you had $1,000 that moved over here to make that go away. Your gain was 0. In this case, you've got 1,000 here, 1,000 here, and you've got $1,000 loan. But this debt's gone. What's your gain? Your gain is 100%. But wait, I've got a loan. Yes, you do. Do I have to pay it back? Yes, you do. When will you pay it back? I have no idea. You might pay it back when you die. You might pay it back over time because the guaranteed interest rate and the dividend come in and pay it off for you. Or maybe you pay it off simply because you're making regular payments and it's paying the loan down for you because you've decided not to grow your bank. You wanted to pay down your loan. There's different logical reasons at each step in the process as to why you want to pay off the loan and why you don't. This stems mainly from the dividend discussion. If the dividend or what I need coming up, if I need to borrow a large chunk of change to pay off something, maybe it's advantageous to pay off the loan. In any case, all you're doing is you have a private bank. While you're in that maximization phase, you have a private bank where you're moving up and down the value of the bank. Whether you add more bank capacity by putting the ceiling higher, by putting more money in your private bank, or you add more bank capacity because you paid off the loan. The end result is the same. You have more money that you can borrow to eliminate the next step. So like I said, there's a logical reason why sometimes you want to pay off the loan, sometimes you don't. I can tell you this, the first time you're going to want to pay off your loan is probably going to be in year 2 or year 3 of the program. And the only reason why I say that is because that's when the dividends start to kick in. And if you're paying off your loan initially, then you're really pursuing a dividend that's pennies. It's not worth going after. It would be better off for you to put more cash in the program that's earning the guaranteed 3, 4, 5% interest than it would be to pay down your loan. Some carriers, you don't have a choice. Some carriers you do. I have a personal preference, and if you end up working with me, you'll find out who that is. All right, let's move on. So let's see a real example of this. So this is a company, a family that I met with a while back. Do you guys see my screen? Does it say Debt Free Life Bank? Katie? Yes? Okay, thanks. All right, very good. So this is one, and it's time to update these guys. I met with them about 3 weeks ago, and they're way far ahead of where they should be here. But this is a 3-year program. So in this program, I don't know if you can see my screen, if it needs to be bigger or not. I can barely see it. But anyway, these folks had a lot of debt, and because they had student loans, I'm going to say this a number of times, student loans are evil. Okay, so they had a number of student loans, which is why their debt service was going to take them 40 years. They had 3 houses, 3 mortgages. It's still going to take them 40 years to get out of debt because of the student loan. Because folks that have a student loan and that student loan is in deferment, that does not mean the amount you owe isn't growing. It is. That just means that you don't have to make a payment, and that is not a good thing. Okay. So when we looked at their program, they were in debt for 40 years. The actual real debt was $767,000. That's through the course of the actual principal amount that they owed and all the interest that they were going to pay over time. 40 years, $767,000. Our program, a little bit better. 7.8 years, saved them $70,000 in interest, got them out of debt 7.8 years. No, by the way, the fella that was this insurance was written on was 36 years old at the time. He just had his 40th birthday. He wanted to retire at age 70. We made it so he can retire at age 50. He wanted to retire at age 70 with 100% equity in 3 properties and nothing else to show for it. We made it so that he could retire at age 50 with a significant, so this shows 4.8 million in 40 years, but this is the real reality. At age 50, he's going to have almost $843,000 in the program. And that's enough to generate, just with the guaranteed interest rate, that's enough to generate about $60,000 a year income for him for the rest of his life without him spending any more money than he's spending right now, without him putting in extra money, without him doing anything crazy, without him going out and getting a second or a third job, without him eating tuna fish and ramen every night, without him sending his 12-year-old, 15-year-old, and 16-year-old to work selling papers. I don't know. I mean, but this is without any additional requirements on their current ability to perform on this program. So if he wants to retire at age 50, he can, and there'll be enough money in his program that he could live off that, right? This is not the $60,000 3% savings that we're talking about. This is leveraging the cost of his debt, making his debt work for him, and using a true debt snowball. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop this. We're done for now. Most of you have seen that presentation before. It doesn't change very often. We're in the process of updating some stuff, and we'll get some new stuff out there. But I wanted to have a minute to have some conversation. We're at 6:20, so we're about on track here. So who's got what questions so far? I will check the chat.
Yeah, Scott, I asked a question in the chat about interest when you take out the loans against your cash value.
All right, so let's talk about
how that works.
All right, so depending on the carrier that you write this with, sometimes the carrier will not allow you to have arbitrage. Sometimes no matter what you do, you're going to earn a flat rate, and you're going to have an interest rate on the loan that's going to be higher than that. Okay. Sometimes the carriers will actually, and those carriers will not return unearned interest. Whenever you take a loan, they're going to charge you 1 year interest up front. All right. So if the loan interest rate, if it's a bad year and the dividend isn't high, and the loan interest rate is, let's say, 5.5%, and the guaranteed gain is 4% plus a dividend, but the dividend is only coming in at 1%. That means no matter what, for that carrier, your net cost of money is 0.5%, which is still great, right? I mean, if you talk about, if you've got a lot of cash in here and you're trying to flip houses and you're using a hard money lender or maybe a bank with a line of credit to go flip those houses, you're paying 6, 7, 8% on that note, right? But here, your cost of money, worst case in that example, is about 0.5%, maybe 0.8%. You can't engineer arbitrage with that particular carrier. If you pay that note back early, they assume that they've earned all that money that they charged you up front for a year. So if you take the loan on day one and pay it off on day two, you don't get any of the money back. You don't get any of the loan premium, the loan interest back. One of our carriers will do that. They will return unearned interest. That's my preferential carrier, because I like to be able to engineer arbitrage. So if in that carrier, I'm just going to use nice round numbers. If my guaranteed interest is 4% and my loan interest rate is 4.7%, then when I take the loan, they charge me 4.7%. And the next month, my 4.7% interest, if I pay the loan back, they return to me 4.3% that they already took. So that means my net cost for that loan was 0.4%. I'm still earning 4%. So that means my net gain is 3.6%. That's arbitrage. I'm able to borrow money at a lesser interest rate than I'm using it for. Okay. So that's that one example. And every case is different. And like I said, there's math here that you have to do. Does it make sense to pay back the loan? Maybe. Just depends on what you're doing it for and why you need it. If it's in the first year, probably not, because all you're doing by paying the loan back is, if it's with that company that allows arbitrage, you're pursuing some dividend and repayment of your cost. It would be better off for you to put that $1,000 into cash value growth, where you're earning 4% or 3% or whatever it is, where you're earning 4% rather than pursuing that small delta on the differential between the loan cost, loan interest, and the guaranteed growth. Does that help you? Did I beat that horse? Is that horse dead enough?
That's helpful. I think it's hard to see that when you talk about it. It's better to see that in numbers, because you're talking about a much larger amount getting 4% guaranteed and a smaller loan amount that might have a higher interest rate. And that's, you got to be able to mentally see that, right?
So for the one company that I use that does that, your worst case net cost of money is 0.8%. Now, here's the good news and the bad news. As the market continues to tank, and as the interest rates continue to rise, the dividend will rise also. Okay. Now, unfortunately, there's usually a 1 to 2 year lag on the dividend because the dividends don't show up until we get the financials for the full year. So yes, you've got some future earnings that are going to come in great, and you may end up having positive arbitrage to begin with, which is great, but we don't know, and we won't know until the end. All right. Anything else? Oh, by the way, Kaylin, I loved your last name. A different Scottish spelling of your last name is my favorite beer of all time.
Oh yeah, that's if you guys haven't had McEwen's Scottish Ale, you should.
Yes, yes, it's my favorite beer, man.
Yep,
it's the best. All right, sorry, you guys got me excited. My wife got me a case of that 2 years ago for Christmas. So
she loves you.
Yeah, she
obviously.
does.
Yeah.
She actually had to import it from Florida, I think. So good stuff, man. Right on. All right. So you just got me all excited, man. McEwen's. Yeah. I know Katie likes McEwen's. All right. So no more questions in chat, and anything else here? I see nothing. I see Tom. What's Tom eating? Let's play that game. I think Tom is eating a bowl of potato and leek soup.
You're not far off.
Okay. What's Tom eating?
Are there no other guesses? I did not bring enough to share. Lobster mac.
Okay. That sounds very rich.
It's a good lunch.
Yeah. Okay.
It's because he's getting rich with DFL.
Is that it? All right. So what I'm going to do now, all right, give me a minute. I got to close out all this stuff. We got way too much stuff open. All right. So now let's go. Yay, new toy. I love new toys. So here's my newest toy, a la Katie Halter. Thank you, Katie H.
You're very welcome. Hopefully it plays properly because I haven't fully tested it in PowerPoint. I only did it in Google Slides.
Oh yeah, I went through it already once. So everything played. All right. So this is dollar duplication. So if any of you were at the advanced market workshop that we did last year, this is something that I alluded to there. And if you were there and you heard Mark Creighton from Mutual Trust up on stage, I asked him some very specific and pointed questions, which are recorded. His answers are recorded. He's on the record. So what my idea was and my thought was absolutely works. I've done half a dozen of them in the last probably month and a half, and they're working great. So here's what this is. So if I take money, so we're going to go through this together for the first time. This is great. All right. So there's two reasons to do this program. And that depends on what your client wants or what the client wants. Are we trying to grow a legacy, or are we trying to grow net wealth that we're going to be able to use while we're alive? And the interesting thing about this program is it does both. And it does both at the same time. The rates of growth are different, but it does both. It increases the net wealth that you have for use over time. It increases your legacy, what you're going to leave for your family as well. So if we take this the next step, okay. Yep. Right. So I'm thinking, Katie, this might be the best way to do it, just to flash it all up rather than go. So we're going to use this as like a case scenario. So let's assume I ran into this last night, actually. Let's assume you've got somebody with a specific amount of money sitting on the sidelines. Maybe they're a real estate investor waiting for the market to tank like it is right now, where it becomes a buyer's market probably this time next year. Maybe there's somebody that just inherited some money. They don't know what to do with it. Maybe there's someone who just retired and they got a big retirement bonus. I don't know. I don't know where the money came from. Doesn't really matter, but they've got access to some kind of liquid cash, savings, CDs, maybe stocks that you pull out of the market because you're tired of losing your behind. Maybe you got money in the market, again, tired of some questionable growth and growing the taxes that you owe as well. So in any case, whatever the case may be, for this example, we're talking about $100,000, and it's somewhere in one of those programs, right? So that means right now, as we start this process, all right, and this is for you vendors, okay? As we start this process, you've got $100,000 cash somewhere. That is either $100,000 of net wealth or $100,000 of legacy, because when you die, that money is going to transfer to your family. It is the same. It is the same money. It's not both. It's the same. If you use that money right now, the cash value, that $100,000, then your net wealth drops to zero, and so does your legacy. They are linked. Okay. So right now you haven't, you may think you've got it invested, but you don't. It's not, there's no difference in the value of the program that you're in, which is a cash program, and what your legacy is. It's equal. What if there's a better way? So the better way is we move the money that's on the sideline, whether it's in a CD, whatever, it doesn't matter. We move that $100,000 and we move it into a single premium whole life. All right, so let's be real about this for a second. What is a single premium whole life? It's a life insurance policy. It has immediate recognition of cash value. It has immediate growth of death benefit. It also has an immediate cost of insurance. And here's the dirty secret. It is also immediately a MEC, modified endowment contract. It's still life insurance, but it is a MEC, okay? So that means that the proceeds from this are going to be taxable, okay? When you move money in here, $100,000, your basis is $100,000. There's going to be a cost of insurance that's going to be dropped down. You get about $90,000 recognition. That money will be available for you to do whatever you want to do with in about 10 days after you move the money into the program. So now, how do you duplicate it? We're going to get there in a second. But one thing I want to say, that $150,000 of death benefit, that's created because this is a life insurance product. So if I give the life insurance company $100,000, they're going to say, great, we're going to reserve $90,000 as cash value for you, and we're going to give you a life insurance policy that's worth $150,000. That number is arbitrary. That's actually accurate for someone who's 64 years old. For a 64-year-old woman, those numbers are correct. If the person is a male and they're 64 or older, it's going to be less of a death benefit. If they're younger, it's going to be more of a death benefit. Okay, so that's if they're unhealthy, it's going to be less of a death benefit. If they're healthy, there's going to be more of a death benefit. This is just for examples, okay? Illustration purposes. So now I've taken that $100,000, I've taken $100,000 cash, turned it into $90,000 cash available, and $150,000 death benefit. So if you're combining the two, if all you look at is legacy growth, I just increased my legacy by 50% overnight. So now my $100,000 is turned into a $150,000 life insurance policy and $90,000 of cash available for me to use for whatever I want to do. So my net wealth has dropped from 100,000 to 90. My legacy is gone from 100,000 to 150. Earlier, if I spent $100,000, I would have zero legacy. In this case, if I spend $90,000, I still have $60,000 legacy. There's still a remainder, okay? But that's not how you do this. We're going to get deep into it in just a second. Okay. Now, if I derive cash value from a single premium whole life, so this is that same example of a banker earlier. Katie's the banker of Katie's debt-free life bank. Katie is also the banker of Katie's single premium whole life policy. So Katie decides if Katie can borrow the money or not. Katie decides if Katie's going to pay it back or not. Katie decides if Katie's going to give herself an interest rate or not. Okay. It's still all the control resides with Katie, right? Which is great because Katie's a smart cookie. So now I've got $90,000 in a single premium whole life. Here's the duplication step. So if I take the max $90,000 out of my program, I'm going to cause my program to fail eventually, or I'm going to cause a big bill for myself. Remember, I told you this is a MEC, but there won't be a taxable. I didn't tell you this part. There won't be a taxable event from your MEC until year 3, because right now you put $100,000 in, you only got 90,000. Any money you pull out is not beyond that 100,000, so you haven't made anything yet. So next year, when that $90,000 grows to 95, you still haven't made anything. The next year, when that 95 grows to 101,000, now if you have a loan out, you put 100,000 in, you've got 101,000 value. Now that $1,000, if you've taken a loan, because it's last in, first out, is how these programs work. So whatever money comes in last is the first money I take out. And it doesn't matter that I took the money 2 years ago. That's still money that's out. So now that $1,000, I owe tax on that $1,000. Okay, that's the nature of a MEC. And the next year, if I've still got a loan, I'm going to owe even more tax because that 101 is going to grow to 105. Now I owe tax on that additional $4,000. Okay, so these are dangerous programs if you don't do them correctly. There's a lot of math involved. I've already done the math for you. We're going to see that in just a second. And this is a way that you literally can duplicate wealth with this program. So now I've taken $90,000, put $100,000 into my single premium whole life. I've taken, it's been recognized as $90,000 cash. I'm taking a loan from the 90,000 of 60%. Folks, that's the sweet spot for these deals. Okay. If you want to take out a loan, you can take out up to 95% of what your cash value is. Don't. From the single premium whole life, if you're deriving or duplicating money from the single premium whole life, don't do more than 60% unless you have a clear means to repay it quickly. Okay. So let's do that. So I'm taking a loan of 60% of my 90,000, which is $54,000. I'm taking that $54,000 and starting a participating whole life policy. Boom. I just duplicated $54,000. So I've still got my 90. It's still earning for me. I'm still getting a dividend. Now I've got 54 more, still earning, still getting a dividend. And I've also added $81,000 death benefit. Because this is, again, single premium whole life, whole life policy, participating whole life policy. I've added death benefit. Actually, I've added more death benefit because there's going to be a term rider with that par whole life as well. Let's move on to the next one. This is fun. Everybody getting all this? You taking notes? There's a quiz. All right. So if I do this from the single premium whole life, and I've got this duplication that's done, what's my score? What's my scorecard look like, right? Here's my scorecard. So now my net wealth, because I've got 90,000 in one program, 49,000 in another program, my net wealth in the first month of this process, right? Less than 30 days, my net wealth is now $139,000 from the value of these two programs. I just increased my net wealth by 39%, right? My legacy, when I started, my legacy was predicated upon that $100,000. If I spent that $100,000, then I was spending my legacy as well. In this case, if I spend that $139,000, then my legacy is 98,000. Is that right? No, 92,000. So I've just increased my legacy 92,000, even if I spend all that money, or else I started at 100,000. Now I'm at 231. So I've increased my legacy 131%. This is what this slide's showing you. So now if we take into, this is without any growth. This is looking forward in a year in the future, right? You look confused, Katie. You did
it. Just blue line didn't cross over the word annually when I did it. So
Yep.
I just have fixes.
Yep, no biggie. So let's look at this. So now what's happening here? So if I look at the 3.5% growth, which that is a 3% guaranteed minimum plus a small dividend of 0.5. Okay, that's where we're coming with that number. The smallest dividend I've ever seen is 0.25%. Okay, so that's a pretty realistic number. All right. So looking at this at the end of year one, now 1 year after the fact, I've turned $100,000 into $239,000 of legacy, or I've turned $100,000 into $143,000 of wealth. Incidentally, the loans that I took to start this is also the first time some of those loans are going to get paid off. Let's go on. Okay. There should be some oohs and ahs now, right? Some holy cows. I'd like to hear a holy cow. Can somebody give me a holy cow, please?
Holy cow.
There you go. Thank you very much. All right.
Scott, my head exploded about 2 slides ago, so I'm still having trouble digesting all that.
Okay. So if I look at my net wealth growth, okay, it's pretty good. I've got 65% growth over 5 years. Now, look, there's this thing out there called the rule of 72. This is not quite the rule of 72, but this investment has 0% chance of loss. This investment also comes with legacy. So the rule of 72 doesn't do that. So technically, if you're looking at this from a growth perspective, if you take into consideration the legacy as well as the cash growth, this exceeds what you would expect with the rule of 72. One more critical piece here is tax exempt. So yes, there's a MEC. We're going to show you about that in just a second. Okay. So this is tax exempt growth if you do it the right way. Dollar duplication. Love it, baby. So you've got that single premium whole life. It's a MEC. You've taken a loan from it. You've taken a $60,000 loan out of your $90,000 day one cash recognized value. Incidentally, whether you take a loan or not, those single premium whole life policies, they become whole, meaning that your initial investment is full, is back there again in about 2.4 years. Okay. So about 2.5 years in, you started with 100,000 on day one, you came down to 90. If you don't do anything in 2.5 years, it'll be back up to 100,000. Okay. That's just with the guaranteed growth rate. So now, how do you pay it back? There's 3 different ways you can pay it back. This is the basic way. This is the way you shouldn't do it unless you're close to death. What do I mean close to death? I mean, realistically, probably 15 years. So if your life expectancy is less than 15 years, don't pay back the loan. So this method will slowly try to pay off the loan, but there's a policy failure that usually happens around year 20 or 21. Okay. So this legacy perspective, your legacy is dwindling in this scenario where you do not make any effort to pay back the loan. Is it the right thing to do? I don't know. Every single person is different. Every one of these programs is different. Sometimes it makes sense to do it. Sometimes it doesn't. Here's my thought of what would be a better way to do it. So this is a debt that you have. You borrowed money from yourself. So you should pay yourself back. What's the rate that you pay yourself back? I don't know. It's different. But if you do this, this is the cool thing. There is a sweet spot. No, by the way, Katie, that sad face doesn't need to be a sad face. Let's make it a happy face because this is actually a good thing. Okay. So in this scenario, there's a specific number that I can pay back into the program with the guaranteed interest coming in and the dividend coming in, where I'm going to be paying enough that there is not a tax. Okay. This is the level repayment process. The loan gets paid down over time. I don't have a taxable event ever, even though it's a MEC and I've taken a loan. The worst case scenario in this that I ran for this at $100,000, the worst case scenario is there may be a year or two where the amount of tax you owe is based on owing tax on $21 of income. Okay. So it's 0 basically. All right. So this is where I would suggest people go. This is a minimal repayment program. What's minimal? If you borrowed $54,000, your minimal repayment program might be $60 a month. It's nothing in the grand scheme of things. All right. And then finally, what happens if you're aggressive? If you're aggressive with the repayment, hold your socks on. All right, Tom, it's time for another holy cow. Can I get a holy cow, please? Tom, Pigeon Tom.
Holy cow.
Yes. Okay. So in this case, we've got growth that is massive. So remember, this is single premium whole life, right? Single premium whole life, we're paying one time. However, we can pay the money back. We can pay it back aggressively. We can get actually growth with it. This is not, this is kind of like a PUA rider that you get with a participating whole life. But the growth that you can get with this, if you pay the money back quickly and are aggressive with the payback, you could get a doubling or tripling or quadrupling over the lifetime of the policy of the legacy value. It's pretty massive. Okay. So you got 3 different ways to pay it back. Don't pay it back at all. Policy could eventually fail in about year 2021. Pay it back at a level, mediocre level, where you're not making any growth, but you're not losing anything either, and you're not having a taxable event. Pay it back aggressively and pay it back quickly, you'll have massive growth in the program. All right. And that should be the end. Is it? Yes. So thank you, everybody, for allowing me to use you as a guinea pig for their first presentation of this program. I have about 15 or 16 minutes left. I'm going to shut up for a minute and let people ask questions. So I'm going to stop sharing and let's go to chat. Is there any new chat? So you need to qualify for this life insurance then. Rita, yes. So these are life insurance programs. So someone has to qualify for them. It doesn't have to be the person that owns the bank. So I did one for the dean of Howard University School of Medicine. He was in his 80s. He's not eligible for life insurance, certainly not eligible for one of these programs. So in that scenario, we just simply wrote it on his son. I did one a couple of weeks ago, same deal. The gentleman was age appropriate, but at 460 pounds, he was not going to get approved at 5 feet 8 inches tall. So for him, we wrote it on his daughter. So different things. I've got one right now, unfortunately, with a disabled American vet who's not going to qualify. So for him, we're going to have to write it on one of his family members. So you don't have to be the insured to be the owner, but the insured does have to qualify for this on a health basis. All right. Loan of cash value or against cash value?
You answered it. Thanks. So.
Okay. Yeah. These loans are always, we're using the cash value as collateral. Okay. All right. So let's see. How many SPL policies did I use? Ron, this was one in this example, one single premium whole life. So we put the money in the single premium, let it sit there 10 days, pulled a loan from it, put it into the par whole life, let that sit there for 10 days, pulled it out and paid debt. So it's the same money in 3 different places: eliminating debt, growing par whole life, growing single premium whole life, same dollars, all 3 places. There you go. Great. So no more questions.
I got a comment.
Okay, go.
Okay. Katie, outstanding job. Really, really, really like what
Thank
you
you,
did
Tom.
there. I mean, that's great.
Appreciate that.
Katie's got, yeah, if you guys need stuff like this done for your clients or whatever, Katie H, she knows what she's doing. So
I apparently am able to translate Scott Forehand into PowerPoint.
It only took
Not
us,
an easy task, I'll tell you.
we spent like 2 hours, didn't we, that one day on going over that stuff or something like that? Doing the math.
It's an hour, but yeah, it can be challenging. But I am working on a DFL that I'll have available for people that want to purchase it. And then I will also be working on, I have another one that's going to be more annuity stacking oriented that Scott's requested. And I think there will probably be something that can come out of both this one current and the next one. But those are Scott's, so I can't sell Scott's.
Katie doesn't work for free. Don't ask her to work for free. She's worth every penny she asks you to pay. Just saying. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, baby. All right.
So While we're on that subject real quick, Scott, I'm looking for recommendations of what's a nice small overview, either PowerPoint or recording that you prefer to send to people as an initial introduction to the whole infinite banking or debt-free life plan.
I have a 7-video Vimeo.
Yep.
It's 1.5 to 3 minutes long each, with one of these recordings. And I was just down in Jacksonville. We just recorded a bunch more, of which are in production right now. That'll be out probably within the month. So,
excellent. Thank you. I use those. I just wanted to make sure that I was working with the most current stuff, and they're awesome. Thank you.
yep. And that's, yeah, if you notice, like up on the YouTube channel, I go back through there every couple of months and I look at some of the old ones and see if it's still relevant. And if the numbers have changed or if the market's changed or whatever, I'll take them down, because I want the content that's up there to be current. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks, buddy.
Yep. Appreciate you.
Did you say Jacksonville?
I did.
Is that Florida?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, the videographer that I use, actually he's more than a videographer, but he's a trained professional cameraman, producer, and he's got a nice studio, and he does everything for me, including all the graphics and stuff. And he's relatively inexpensive for what he can
Is this
offer.
Eric?
It is.
Eric's awesome.
Yep, Eric is awesome. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about what we just saw? Ronnie V, come on, buddy. Come on, Mr. Venters. Don't be that way. Don't just.
I
stare
don't,
at
but
me.
I want to thank you, Scott. I have an appointment in about 10 minutes I need to get ready for. I just wanted to thank you very much for this. And
So
I had a couple of people on here that I know really got a lot out of it.
Good. So are you saying, Tom, that you have an appointment in 10 minutes to go help protect a family?
Yes, I do.
Fantastic. Go do it.
I will. You take care of yourself. Bye, everybody.
All right. All right. Everybody's dwindling, so I guess that's fine. It is 6:50. We don't stop early very often, but we're going to tonight. So thank you, everybody, for coming. Hopefully you got something out of this. I will put this up on YouTube at some point. I just have to let the thing render. So enjoy.
Cool.
Thanks, Katie. You did a great job.
I do have a case design that I could use help with, but I don't know if that's something that you'd want to do with the group or just one-on-one.
Well, hold on one second.